Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 26 of season 2. My name is Tamara, and you're listening to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Today's guest is T. We'll be talking about a book about pleasing women in bed called Drive Her Wild. And I'll mention some other titles that have come highly recommended as well. And as always, if you like this episode, be sure to tell your friends about it and rate it as well. All right. Thanks for joining me today, T.
Thank you for inviting me. How are you today?
I am great. I'm so happy to have you. And do you want to just jump in, or what did you find interesting about the book? Or, I mean, I know you said you passed it on to other people too. So just kind of like, where are you with your thoughts on the book?
So I've owned this book for approximately 10 to 12 years. It just so happened I was in Barnes & Noble, just walking around. It was on the clearance table. I started looking at it and I started flipping through it. And I was like, oh, this is nicely done. It wasn't a throw in your face type of thing. It did have pictures in it. But after flipping through, I realized that this book would definitely help my man spice things up a little bit after 1,000 years of marriage.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and then what were there any particular, like what impact did it have? Like what did he start with? Did he read the whole thing, or do a picture each, or like what was your philosophy of how he tackled it, or even how you presented it to him? Was he happy to get it? How was that?
I think it was a mixed bag, because I don't think any man wants to feel that he is not pleasing his woman. And so at first it was, I don't need that. And I was just like, we all can stand to improve. If you want to find a book that you feel is interesting where I can hone my skills, I will be more than happy to purchase said book, and then we could practice these skills. And so initially, there was some reticence, but after a time, there were some things that we tried. And I was just looking at the book again today to refresh my memory. And it's broken down into 6 categories: seduction, the buildup, variety, going down, divine inspiration, and then hot sex. And within those, it really does teach the man about a woman's body. And I think that's the part that a lot of men miss. As I think it was Stephen Colbert just recently had a sideways picture of a woman and asked men what part of the body was certain parts, and not one man could tell him where the uvula was, where the clitoris was, the anus, even the vaginal opening, which tells me that there's a lot of education that some people still need in order to make sure they have a healthy sex relationship.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the things the first thing it talks about is the fact that sex does not start in the bed for a woman.
Yes.
And that it starts with that little touch, that act of kindness, just the what is the words of affirmation. So sort of those 5 love languages. And if you are fulfilling a woman out of the bed, once you get in the bed, it's not a problem. And so I love that chapter, and making sure that my man understood that, after raising children, working, cleaning, cooking, there was very little energy left for a whole bunch of excitement. And so trying to teach him or make him understand that I needed these things before we lay down for the night made a huge difference. And just like any man, it's like, I'll try it for a little bit and then I'll wane off. And, we have to remind them, this was working. Let's go back to this particular act so that we can spice these things up again.
Yeah, definitely reinforcement occasionally. And just, that whole idea of I just want to reiterate that to the men, like it does start before the bedroom. And if you're meeting our needs, or, like, especially the love languages, if you're going through the love languages and your woman, they call it like your cup is full in the love languages, like your tank is full. So if the fuller the tank, the more willing and likely she's going to want to go to bed with you in the first place. And the more she enjoys it by learning these techniques, the more she will want to do it again. So it's pretty much a win-win in my mind. So, but yeah, go on with the,
yes. So another part of the book, I'm flipping the pages as I'm talking to you just to refresh my memory because it's been so long. This book also talks about 10 ways to touch her. It compares a circular stroke, the fanning stroke, a kneading stroke, a percussion stroke, stroking around the navel, stroking feet, and stroking the head and the neck. And it actually gives you tips on how to do that. I'm not overly experienced in the sexual nature. However, I can tell you that I've met some people and we've had conversations about men and that's like how the touch begins. And that's not necessarily how to get someone excited when you're a little heavy handed. And so I like that this book did teach different techniques on how to physically touch a woman when you're in an intimate setting.
Yeah.
I thought that was very helpful. It also talks about the sensitivity of the body parts, on which ones you should be focused on in order for your woman to reach the highest arousal, with the understanding that arousal is different for every woman.
Yeah.
But you should try each area to find out where that point is on the woman to make her extremely excited. What else can I say about this wonderful book? And it's a very short book. I don't know if I told you that. This book is only 50. Nope. This book is 64 pages, including the content and index pages.
Wow.
And introduction. Yes. So then it goes into, the breakdown of the body, how the woman's body is put together, and then one of the other most important part, and that is the foreplay.
Yeah. How
to do foreplay, that sometimes sex is not penetration. Sometimes sex is just the foreplay and the leading up and the building up. And then, one partner may be satisfied doing that. And it's okay for one partner in this particular case to be satisfied and leave it at that, because then the other thought is some women feel that men are greedy.
Yeah.
And they don't care about the woman's satisfaction, which is the reason why I really love this book, because it lets that man know, hey, we do have a little bit more work to do. It's not like, okay, I touched you, I'm in there, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because most women cannot orgasm through penetration.
Yeah. Unless they're
a lot of work.
Yeah, unless their clitoris is stimulated already and the foreplay has happened, and then penetration will cause that to happen at the end. But yeah, it reminds me of a book I read. I think it's Girl Wash Your Face. And she had an agreement with her husband that they both got to have an orgasm. Like, that's how sex happened. There was, if he had one, not like a chore, but like, the agreement was that they both were going to have one if they had sex. So like, until it happened, he made sure or whatever. I'm sure it didn't take that long to figure out what would work, but I just thought that was very cool that they had an agreement that, and they had to come to that after her not having
That's
one,
interesting.
of course. Yeah. I'm sure it came out of necessity.
I had a similar one, not quite like that. I did have a similar one. What I can say is that I read a book, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was just like, sometimes you need to schedule intimacy with your mate, just like you schedule everything. And so I remember having a conversation. I asked my husband, so, how many times a week would be acceptable for you? He was like, every day. And I said, okay, that's not necessarily acceptable for me. We need to be a little bit more realistic on, this thing. So we decided 2 days a week. And that was fine until it became more of a chore than pleasure, because all of the tips that were learned with this book sort of went out the door, because it was, I know I'm going to get this, so I don't need to work for it.
Yeah, I can see that.
So that intimacy definitely has to be an agreement on both parties, and both parties care about how the other person is feeling while they're being intimate. Which, of course, this book does show. Okay, one of the other things this book talks about is how to improve her chance of an orgasm. So it goes into how to extend sexual orgasm, how to make a young lady a person have multiple orgasms, the G-spot, hunting for the sex zone is what they call it, simultaneous orgasms, how to tell when a woman is faking it, when women, what to do with women who just don't seem to orgasm, and women who cannot orgasm. And so I think that's why I said I love this book, because it was very comprehensive. And I did give this to my male children because I wanted them to have a basic understanding of a woman's body and what it takes for a woman to be pleased.
Yeah. And that's the primary reason. I mean, I started doing stand up first where I talk about this, and I know, people have listened knows that, but that's, kind of my thing was like the older, wiser woman, like just saying like, really, there's a spot called the clit and please don't ignore it. And I always joke that it's not an elevator button where you touch it once and expect to enter. There's much more to it. So yeah. And having your sons, I'm sure they appreciate it very much.
But there's one thing about this book that I did not mention that I would like to say, because if I was single, I would not know a man was hitting on me.
Yes,
I just
I'm the
have
same
no
way.
clue. I just think the person is being friendly, and I call him a friend, and that's all she wrote. Unless the person is like blatantly sexual, then I have no clue. So part of this book is how to read sexual signals.
Mm.
So earlier I said that intimacy and sex begin outside of the bed. Well, according to this book, if you have good eye contact or your mouth moves without words, so I don't even know how to describe it. I guess like a soft opening and then it stays open while talking. As you and your partner are together and you start matching each other's mannerisms, and then hand contact, one of you start touching the other one a little bit more, and fiddling. I didn't realize that women fiddle, but I guess we do when we find someone attractive. Because when I think about it, the hair flip and or whatever your tell is, and then it talks about the fact that you become all fingers and thumbs when you become sexually attracted to someone. And the one that we all do, we start to blush.
Yeah.
So that's a hint as well when you're speaking for husband and wife. I'll speak from my perspective. If you can still get your spouse to do one of those things, then you're on track.
Yeah.
As far as
awesome.
your intimacy, to begin something special.
Yeah, like the timing is right. I actually had an ex-boyfriend. We talked about getting back together, and he came over. We had talked a couple times. So he came over the second time, and I had taken a shower. I just like threw on a t-shirt, like just a t-shirt, and my hair was up. And so he came over and he was like thinking to himself, I made no effort because we were going to dinner. I'm like, and then in my mind, we didn't need to go to dinner. Like, he was coming over for other stuff. We had gone out to dinner the last time. Anyway, so I was sending the signal in my mind. He was not picking up the signal. He was like, didn't talk to me for a while because he's like, you didn't even make an effort to get dressed to go to dinner. I was like, I was sending the opposite signal that we didn't need to go. And he just totally didn't pick it up. So yes, now he knows. I told him that other guys will bring like a bottle of wine or bring something over. And then, you go to dinner, sure. But that's like intended that we're coming back, so I don't know, maybe not all guys are as, but yeah, a lot of guys don't catch on those. So good to have those tips in there is my point.
Well, I mean, I don't even catch on myself because I'm too busy doing other things and living my life to pay attention to the subtleties of, oh, that's what he meant. Okay, here I come.
Yeah, no, I've for sure been there myself too. Like I have no idea, which a guy friend was like, well, it's kind of endearing because you're like, you don't know. So obviously you don't have a big head about it because you have no idea when it's happening. So I'm like, yeah, very true.
That is true. So this beautiful book then goes over to let's not make it boring. I'm paraphrasing. That's not the chapter.
Yeah.
But it talks about how you can use different sexual positions to keep things nice and fresh, and or those positions that would allow the female to have more access to her own body to stimulate herself, and or for the male to be able to stimulate herself while you're while you're in the heat of the moment. And so I do like that. And it appears that this book is like all about the tens, because the 10 positions that they talk about here are missionary, of course. Then they talk about leg 11, and that's when the woman would have her feet on the male's chest. Which is, you got to be flexible to do that, because I can see me catching a Charlie horse. They have the cliffhanger, and that's the one where the man would pull the woman to the edge of the bed. They have getting an eyeful, and that's when they encourage the partner to sit on top of you. So the woman is sitting on top of the male. And then, of course, we have the, what do they call it? The cowgirl.
Yeah.
You have the cowgirl. And then they talk about sitting down, where you're making a letter V with your bodies. Spooning, which is always great.
Mm-hmm.
You're imagining the V with the bodies.
Yeah, I was, yeah. I was picturing it.
Both sitting down. Your legs would be over his legs. They're talking about up against a wall,
Yeah.
the wheelbarrow, and then doggy style. So the difference between the wheelbarrow and the doggy style is the wheelbarrow, the male is actually lifting the female's legs.
Okay.
So he's supporting her. Yeah, so that's why I love this book, because it gives so many options.
Yeah.
And so, if you're frisky and you're like, okay, just pick one, open a page, and that's what we're going to try tonight.
Yeah.
And it actually tells the male how to do what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I would like to say this one thing. The biggest thing about all of these sexual positions that they're listing and all these tips is that communication is the most important part.
Yeah.
If you can communicate with your partner, and your partner can be honest and was like, oh, no, you're going too far, or I don't feel this, let's shift, and there are no hurt feelings, or you're definitely not in the right spot right now. I think that is like the ultimate way to make sure that both people are happy at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I like what you said earlier about leaving access to the woman's body, because I know, I've brought in toys before, either my hand, his hand, or the toy, and any of the three work. And I like that, that it explains that. And then, like you were saying, it's a good way to communicate. And you could just get the book out and, pick a page, like you said, talk about it, or, just maybe read it. And then it will lead to wanting to go to bed together, because as you're reading and looking at the pictures and be like, ooh, let's try this. But yeah, definitely communication. We say that in a lot of my episodes on this podcast. Communication is always good. And there is an episode, and I mention it a lot. Leah Carey has an acronym to have the discussion about this, but this book would obviously be another resource to just, go ahead and talk about what you like and don't like and what you need and help.
Yes. Right. So it's funny that they also mention a Kama Sutra in this book.
Okay.
And I'm laughing because if you're not a yogi, I don't see how you would make it through half of the positions in Kama Sutra, because you have to be extremely flexible to do some of those things. So in this one, it just says that the Kama Sutra says that it's the man's duty to please his partner. And to this end, it suggests sensual movements that can increase her enjoyment, such as churning, grinding your penis in circles inside of her, and avoiding thrusting movements. So that's what they took from the Kama Sutra in this particular book.
Yeah, I can see that. And actually that reminds me of I mentioned I would mention two other books. One of them was called Heart of Tantric Sex. And then another one, like a supplement to this, is The Anatomy of Women's Arousal. That was a guy friend suggested those and said that he has had good experiences, and so has the women he's been with. So just a couple more books in there too. But yeah, that's funny about the Kama Sutra. They're like, all right, it's hard to do, so at least do this at a minimum. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can just hear the ow, 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 wait, I have a cramp. Okay, we need to switch this thing up with some of those positions.
Yeah, I can see that
then
too.
they talk about the next chapter in this book is about going down, which, depending upon culture, some people do not feel from a cultural perspective that they should be doing such a thing. I've had conversations with female friends, where they feel like they have to go be waxed every week and look like a chicken. Yeah. And then there were others at the table that were just like, no, I'll just trim it up. And then some of the women at the table were like, we're going to have a bush down here and they're going to have to like it or not. And I was just like, okay, I get it. I get all of that. It's your own preference and your man's preference. But no matter what you decide to do, you still have to know the woman's body. My husband should still know my body enough to understand if I like firm pressure, if I like tickling sensation, if I would like to have finger stimulation while receiving cunnilingus, or what it is. So this particular book again has 10 tips. It tells you where to begin, where you're going to go for goal and get more money for your bang, different strokes. It talks about being in a crab position, which is very interesting. How to spice it up, how to keep your rhythm, how to actually lick a clitoris, how to bring your partner to the edge, which means bringing them to the bed and continuing. The triangle. This is so funny because the first sentence is, if you're doing a headstand or maybe some yoga, this may appeal to your partner. I just talked about yoga. And then it talks about sitting on the face. So depending upon your man, that shaving thing might work. It might not work at that point because depends upon what you're doing and how you like to do it. So again, I love this book because in addition to all of the different ways they're telling you that you can perform oral sex on your woman, it gives you tips on when you're doing it. And then one of them does say mix it up. But again, ultimately that communication, and you need to know your woman's body in order to make sure that you're getting the maximum effect of your work efforts.
Yeah. And I would say when it mentions mix it up, preferably not right before she's about to, right before it's the perfect way, and then you switch it up. But yeah, yes. I know what you mean but yeah, that's awesome. And we have an episode just on oral sex where we talk about hair or not. And, I think a lot of women had been under the assumption that men prefer no hair, but the guy I was talking to said him and his friends have said that they prefer hair. That's why we're women, and you can have as little or as much, like you said, trimming and all that, but it's up to you and your man, of course. But just there are a lot of variety and thoughts on that particular topic too. And then I forget the last thing you said. Oh, I already mentioned the mixing it up. So yeah. Who is the author? I think there's one more chapter you said, but just who is the author? Just so people can go get the book themselves too.
Katie Bevan. Katie with a Y, and the last name is spelled Bevan.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be perfect. And especially with the pictures, obviously the more we can talk about it, sure. But when you want to see for yourself, that'll be beneficial.
Yes. I mean, again, I cannot tell you how well done this book is. It even goes into, like you said earlier, bringing in toys and other items into the bedroom to spice things up. It talks about tying you up, role playing, strap on, spanking, anal sex. And so it brings in everything that you could think of. This book brings it in. It talks about the power of a massage. And just like the little funny things like the elephant ear G-string for the male, or the elephant trunk G-string for the male. And I think that this is like the best book I've ever seen. And then it also goes in, of course, safe sex. It talks about condoms and birth control, lubricants, and I cannot tell you, this book is at least 15 years old in my household. And today I still reference it. I love this book. As I said earlier, I gave it to all of my children so they would understand their partner's bodies and how to be effective when it comes to intimacy. My oldest child told me that it works like a charm.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I can see this being like a good birthday, Christmas present for like all the men in your life. And then if they ask, be like, "Oh yeah, I got this for everyone," so they don't have to feel like you're specifically giving it to them if they're sensitive about that. Obviously, communicating is fine too, and just saying like, "Hey, yeah," but I don't know, that'd be one way to do it. Just get it for all the men.
Yes,
and just be like, "Yeah, oh, I just have to for you too."
I think it's too big to go into a stocking, but you can always wrap it up and have it right outside the stocking for the person to get. Hopefully it's still in publication because, again, I said this is a very, very old book. And according to this, it was $12.99 when I bought it. So that tells you something because books cost a fortune now. Mm-hmm. And it was originally published in 2004.
Okay. Yeah. And if not, hopefully online, or maybe there's been a update or another one, or like podcasts, if you choose one, it says you might like this too. Maybe there's a way, if you search for it, they could give you some other books.
Yes.
Yeah, but this has been awesome. And any closing thoughts, or was that kind of like the gist of the book? And I know you just kind of basically did give your closing thoughts that, you can't get enough of how great it is, and your son can attest to it as well.
I'll close with another book that we discussed earlier. You and I discussed earlier.
off recording. And it was about another book that I cannot remember the name of it. And I want to say How to Drive Your Man Wild. And in this particular book, it talked about the attitude of the woman. And the first chapter was solely about a mousy looking woman who always kept a man and a beautiful woman who could not keep a man. And then during their conversation, the mousy woman said, I walk around like I know my stuff is good, and people catch up on that and they catch on it. So the woman who was beautiful was just like, okay, I've never heard of that. And so my coworkers and I actually tried it, where there was a group of us, one group was in front of the other, and the first group was, I think we were initially the I have low thoughts about myself group, and we noticed that people slammed the doors in our faces. They didn't speak to us. And the other group, who said that they had it going on and they were the most attractive thing in the world, had doors open for them. They had offers for lunch to buy their lunches and constant hellos, and people were drawn towards them. And on the way back to work, we did the opposite. And my group that was the okay, I don't feel good about myself group, then were received very well by everyone that we were going past, and we were spoken to. The doors were being held open, and it was amazing to all of us to see that mindset made a huge difference in being able to attract someone to us.
Yeah.
And when I remember the name of that book, I will definitely let you know.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And just the concept in general. I mean, and I do find that to be true too, because, even though I am older, I feel like I talked about this in my last episode. The older you get, the more confident you get. So you might not be as like in your prime per se, but now you have the confidence. So I feel like I attract more men because I feel confident and have that mindset that I am a good catch, and I do have it going on. And when I was younger and maybe looked more the part, I didn't feel it. So, it didn't happen as much. So yeah, definitely be a good experiment to try. Any of you listeners out there, if you want to try that, you can email or DM me the results. I'd be curious to hear about your mindset experience. So, and the email is Tamara at straightfromthesourcesmouthpod.co. I think that's right. I'll put it in the description. But yeah, thanks for that extra piece. I know we mentioned we were going to talk about mindset, and then I forgot to bring it up. So I'm glad you did. But thank you very much, T, for being on. I think people will get a lot out of this episode, and hopefully the book is still around and they can purchase it. And if nothing else, they got the tips that we mentioned, or you mentioned from the book. So, but thank you again for being on.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I've enjoyed myself, and hopefully someone has learned something from this podcast.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Thanks, everyone. You have been listening to Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast, Frank talk about sex and dating. And if you enjoyed it, please rate it or tell your friends about it, or both. All right. Thank you.
Frank talk, sex and dating educates.